Okay, thanks everybody. Thanks Brad and Beth. Yeah, so I'm just gonna really quick kind of introduce our panelists, and then they're gonna give a little short talk about what they do and in the perspective of fire. And we'll have time for questions. I have some backup questions. I encourage you guys to think about questions that you have. We have been short, probably our fault as speakers for questions in the prior sessions. So if there are stuff that you can come up with, feel free. So we have three panelists today who kind of worked in different areas of fire management, watershed management, and research as well. And so Elliott Parsons, we heard from before. What is your official title? Is it a specialist with the Pacific Risk? Assistant Specialist Pacific Risk. So you heard from him about that part of the project. I'd also like to add, and I think that this was mentioned before, that Elliott also worked as a manager at Pu'uawa on the Big Island for over 10 years, right? It was a good stretch there. So he's got like multiple areas that are related to this. We also have in the middle, Kapua Kawelo, who is the program manager for the Army Natural Resources Program, Oahu. And so she helps manage a kind of wide array of species stabilization, endangered species for the island of Oahu as part of kind of mitigating training impacts. And fire is a piece of what they deal with there. And we have also Ryan Peralta, Forest Management Supervisor, based here on Hawaii, on Oahu with DLNR, Division of Forestry and Wildlife. And so I think we're going to start with Elliott. So brief presentations from each, and then we'll kind of go into questions afterwards. So just hold your questions for each speaker until after, please. Thanks. Do you want to present from there? I can drive your slides if you guys prefer to sit, or you can walk up to the podium, or someone else can drive. Okay.
At the stage. Oh, can you hear me? All right. All of a sudden, okay. So I just wanted to show a few pictures that hopefully would generate some interesting conversation and discussion. So this was a lightning strike fire at Pu'uva'a a few years ago. Our crew saw it start. They called me. They said, "There's a fire, lightning. We saw it. It's about a quarter acre." Called a couple minutes later, it's 10 acres. Called a couple minutes later, it's 100 acres. And it burned a couple thousand acres of mostly invasive fountain grass. This area has burned multiple times before. This was an opportunity to take the advisory council out and check out some of the things that are hidden by the fountain grass. Not all fires are big though. A lot of them are small. So there are many little fire starts off the highway over the years. And those are usually put out pretty quickly. But of course, as Clay mentioned, due to changes in land use and some pretty crazy firestorm situations with crazy wind, you know, there's a question of have we entered this era of mega fires in Hawaii? Just a couple of images from this was, I believe, the Mono Road fire. The sedimentation must have been pretty extensive because the sky darkened for weeks. You could barely drive on the upper highway during and right after the fire because you couldn't see more than 10-15 feet in front of you. But this was down at Waikoloa, down near the ocean, and this was just a partial, even though it was a panoramic picture, it's just a partial picture I took of the smoke from that one. And then of course, probably saw images like this on the news, in the newspaper. Here's another one, Upper Pu'uanahulu this last summer, burning down into one of the last stands of montane dry forest with this particular forest type, an area that was actually being prepared to be fenced and managed. And then they had to revisit it afterwards because so many trees were lost during the fire. And so there's a lot of discussion about climate change and how it's going to impact fires in the future. and make them more severe, harder to control. And of course, discussions about changing fire regimes, and it's not just in dry ecosystems. I mean, these changes are happening across many different kinds of ecosystems, from tropical rainforest to boreal forest to dry forest. And we've got to ask ourselves a number of questions now that we're dealing with these really big, hard to control fires, such as how do we design fire breaks, and are they even going to make a difference in the future? Do we need to think beyond fire breaks and maybe even something else that we, out of the box thinking? How do we do revegetation on a large scale? This was Waikolo Dry Forest Initiative, and that 2018 Waikolo fire burned about 22 acres of the preserve. And so they initiated this pretty massive seed scattering project. And we just need so many more of these projects. So we just need to figure out ways to bank seeds from all the species, some of which are so rare, there's fewer than 50 individuals left in the wild. And we just can't, we don't have enough capacity and staff to go out and collect seeds because of course we're busy trying to maintain fire breaks. And then of course, this PI-CASC funded work trying to identify high fire risk plants, maybe even ones that aren't here yet, that could become an issue, so we can try to keep them out. And then I brought up the RAD framework at the last talk, but I think it's appropriate for the wildfire conversation because, it's all about resistance. We're trying to resist fire as much as we can, but maybe there's some creative ways we can direct ecosystems towards some kind of less flammable state. So what does climate adaptation look like for wildfire management? And can we come up with some new creative solutions and ideas? And that's it for me.
Thanks, Elliott. I'll just add a couple of things just to give you guys a sense of the scale in terms of ignitions. We're like at about 1,000 ignitions on average each year, right? So that's across the state. So only about 5% of those turn into these big fires, but it's constant, right? It's like all the time. And I think Ryan, you're next. And hopefully Ryan's talk, I think we're going to cover some of those questions that Elliott brought up about what folks are doing on the ground.
You got 5 or 8? I need 3. Full disclosure, I'm not the first guy that they asked. I'm the second string guy, but Christian called me, and Christian's the man. So I was like, whatever you want, Christian. So you got the second string guy up here. Okay. I'm driving. Yeah. Everybody's first string when they're on the field. Okay. That's me. I'm going to dazzle you with pictures and not a lot of content. That's my strategy. Okay, Division of Forest and Wildlife. That's our mission. Our mission is to protect, manage, and restore. It's new. It used to be longer. And restore natural and cultural resources in collaboration with the people of Hawaii. We envision a future with thriving native ecosystems and opportunities for the people of Hawaii to engage with nature. So we're like a land managing entity, and we do a lot. I wrote it. I used to have it in here, but Christian said, don't do that because you can't see it. So I always do what Christian says. So that translates to like public recreation. So we manage and facilitate camping, hiking, mountain biking, OHV recreation, off-highway vehicles, horseback riding, bird watching, whatever the public wants to do in the forest reserves. The forest reserves are your forest reserves. It's the public's forest reserves. It's the people's public forest reserves. We manage it for you guys to enjoy and whatever. There's hunting. We also do native forest resource protection and restoration. We do T&E work. That's plants, snails, birds, invertebrates, whatever. Weed control. We have a nursery. Our nursery is for outplanting of our conservation work. We do sales. We provide plants for exhibition and decorum, like the governor's award ceremony. They says we need plants to make it look pretty, and so we grow plants to make it look pretty. And if you have a nursery, it's very different. Like you're not gonna have, like you're gonna do dibbles, right? 1,000 dibbles to outplant for restoration work, but you're not gonna have a dibble to for the governor's award ceremony. So it's a whole different type of plant and stuff that we're talking like 5-gallon pots, 20-gallon pots, whatever. So it's a different trip. Career fair, stuff like that. We do forest product stuff, like people collect bamboo for karamatsu, maile, firewood, fruits, flowers, post-wood, whatever. People apply for permits, or we give it to them for free if they're doing like lattice work in their backyard. So it's like personal use. There's commercial use, personal use. We do timber management. Due to our state constitution, we facilitate traditional cultural practices. People want to conduct protocol, gather and harvest stuff, for that kind of stuff. We whatever. We use the forest can be a classroom for la'au, lapa'au teaching or whatever have you. All kinds of stuff. We have offshore island management. We have a wildfire management program. We do prevention, pre-suppression, and suppression. Very few people, I don't think anybody in Hawaii really does those three. On the mainland, the counterparts would be like US Forest Service, BLM, DOI, stuff like that, Fish and Wildlife. But very few land managers are also firefighters. Yeah, so we do all three. And then we do also emergency response because of our experience with wildfire stuff. Our ICS knowledge and whatnot, it translates to assisting with things like when Leilani Estates was going and Fisher 8, we help with DOH with the COVID response, Kauai flooding, the Mauna Loa eruption, stuff like that. So we do a lot of stuff and we're not very big. So that's some background on those guys. This is our island of Oahu. I'm the forestry manager for Oahu, and basically, so the green stuff is our stuff. So wherever there's a fire in the green, Chapter 185 land fire law says we got to go. Wherever it's pink, that's like we don't wait for the fire to burn into the green before we go. So HFD can call us. We can go straight in and help them instead of waiting for our trees to burn before we engage. And then the other colors like the blue and the yellow and whatnot, we have partners, Fish and Wildlife, stuff like that, Army, stuff like that. So that's basically a brief snapshot of what our fire management jurisdiction looks like for the island. The whole state is broken down like this. So every island has a similar map. We call it the pink and the green map, but there's other colors, but for main, it's too long to say other stuff. Okay, climate change in Hawaii. Okay, what did I write? Climate change in Hawaii. So I looked it up. This is what climate change in Hawaii means. Those are the sites. So I'm not making this up. Increased daily temperatures, less rainfall and drought, increased loss of land area from wildfires, change in habitat and ecosystem characteristics, hotter, drier ecosystems, and increased invasive species. So what is the Division of Forestry and Wildlife doing on Oahu? I broke it down before the fire, during the fire, and after the fire. So before the fire, we are trying to do seed orchards so that we can harvest seeds, store seeds, and then after the fire, we can do stuff with the seeds to mitigate and rehabilitate. We have a project that we're trying to embark on, error retardant application. I heard somebody from West Coast, Pacific Northwest. We don't do that red stuff here. We want to, the retardant. We want to, it's tricky. But one of the things that we're planning on doing is doing an error application of retardant on the areas that we can't get fire breaks to because it's too rocky or too steep or whatever. And what that fire retardant break is, when the fire hits that retardant, it's like chemistry. It like stops the fire and creates mist. I can't get into it because I don't understand it, but I've seen it. It's awesome. But that's one project we're trying to work on before the fire. So you apply it so that when the fire hits that thing, then it's good. The way it works is, anyway, that's enough. Green breaks. Basically, you have fire breaks. You have like the picture over there with the dirt. That's a fire break. A green break is where you plant trees, replace the Guinea grass. And so in the fire, instead of like tall Guinea grass, you have like shaded out stuff that shades out the fuels and whatnot. And so instead of grass, you have trees, which are less likely to burn. It buys you more time. So instead of just raging fire through everything, you have the green break and it stops it, slows it down, we can jump on it. So then during the fire, you have the green break and the fire break, and then mobilization and suppression, that's actually fighting a fire. After fire, we have this thing called the ABC project. After burn care hydro seeding, this contractor came up to it, this thing he can actually do, he demonstrated, it's cool, it works. It's like hydro mulching, but hydro seeding with native seeds. And so it's basically like the green break project, but way better because he's got mulch. And so the mulch will suppress the grass. And then and the problem is after a fire, when is it? It's hot, it's summertime. That's not a great time to plant, right? Because you can plant and they're gonna die. But with the mulch, it suppresses the weeds for a while. And then when it rains, then the actual good stuff grows. And then want to do aero seeding. We're trying to move away from planting because planting is hard in the sense that you have to have all these plants hoping for there to be a fire. And then, you know what I mean? Like the whole seed scatter stuff is a better way to go. And so this hydromulch with this partner is the best strategy. Okay, our needs, staff time, funds. You get those three things, you can do anything. 8 wonders of the road, whatever, but it's like not super duper great. I'm running out of time. Okay, okay, I'm gonna read that. What is the fastest? This is what I think we need. Here's questions that we need answers to for science management. What is the fastest way to build a green break? How do we accomplish landscape scale, post-fire restoration in the cheapest effective way? Seed lab, we need a seed lab. We don't have a seed lab, but we need one for audit stuff. Funds, landscape scale or remote location work. We're looking at aerial delivery because it's landscape, right? Back in the, like you can't do dibble tubes, bare root dibble tubes on the like thousands of acres like they're talking about. So we're looking at some kind of aerial delivery and then staffing, of course. So for those things. I'm done.
Thanks, Ryan. Kapua, I got nothing to add to that one, so.
I probably don't. Oh, you don't have my slides.
Who's gonna wing it?
I'm gonna wing it. That's fine because Ryan showed everything I needed you guys to see. And Elliott. Aloha, my name is Kapua Kawelo. I'm the Natural Resources Program Manager for the Army here on Oahu. We are lucky enough to cooperate with University of Hawaii to do the natural resource management that our program conducts, primarily in the Waiʻanaes here on this island. We have the privilege, my first slide was a picture showing some of the resources we have the privilege to manage. Kahuli tree snails, we manage them at 7 sites in the Waiʻanaes. We largely within predator-free fences to protect them from Jackson's chameleons and rats and cannibal snails. We also work with Oahu Elepaio, the native flycatcher. Elepaio, we manage 75 pairs of birds during the nesting season. We manage the predators around the nest to protect the eggs and the nestlings. We get to work with lots of rare and endangered native Hawaiian plants and the habitats that they exist in. So we work, you know, from the Tapaka'ala to, you know, dry shrubland in Makua and elsewhere in the Waiʻanaes. Let's see. And then insects, of course, can't forget the insects. So I think the reason I've been asked here today is because with the changing climate, yeah, we're experiencing severe fires and those have extensive impacts on natural resources. So the slide, my slide number 2, I think I sent them too early. Maybe that was my problem. Is that this year we had 3 fires in the Waiʻanaes that we responded to. It's really difficult to do that in the Waiʻanae Mountains. The resources are in steep, you know, rocky, inaccessible terrain. So, you know, some of the methods that might be applied on the continental US and even on Hawaii Island with bulldozers and those types of response or prevention mechanisms are not possible here. So it's largely a helicopter game. So we need science to help us support that. And this was the most important slide I had, was that it listed my research and science needs. Anyways, so luckily I have them here. I think what Ryan said hit on most of, you know, the things that I feel are important to further and to connect management with research in this realm. Develop post-fire seeding and revegetation systems to apply on a large scale. So we've dabbled in that. Like Ryan said, there's been some pilot projects with hydro seeding with native seeds, but we don't have the seed source to supply and respond to a huge fire. And we don't have the best stock selected for maximizing the effectiveness of that revegetation response. So we're talking, yeah, like we have a seed bank right now that has 26 million seeds in it. Many of those are common native plants, but that's not for that intended purpose. That's for restoration, small scale habitat work. So we really need to expand that dramatically. Fire early detection and monitoring and notification system. So we've talked about, like on the mainland, there's fire spotters in towers. We don't have that system here. But for example, last year we were on Ohikilola Ridge on a camping trip doing some rare plant monitoring on the cliffs. And across the valley in Kuokala Forest Reserve, there was a small fire that we could see from our vantage point, but nobody could see from Makai. So we notified through, text string people that needed to know, and they went out and they said, no, there's no fire, because from below you were not able to observe it. So we've got to figure out ways. I mean, there's, the speaker earlier today, Mr. Longman, Dr. Longman was talking about this data repository. I think that this is the aspect, the angle of things that we need to move towards, being able to, every minute counts, like what Elliott recounted, right? In Makua, we had a fire, the sun came up and in an hour it had burned 100 acres. So, and we were there in an hour, but that 100 acres had already gone up and impacted our Ma'ohauhele population. Conversion of introduced grasslands to native communities. That's a really tall order. And we dabble in it on the small scale, but certainly there's got to be some smart people in the room who can move the needle forward on that. Development of testing of mainland firefighting tools and techniques to Hawaii. So Ryan talked about, the aerial application of fire retardant. On the mainland, they have air tankers, and, when we're talking the extreme fire behavior that we saw on Hawaii Island, the last 2 years, I think we need to step up our game in terms of our ability to respond, the techniques we have. And then real-time fire mapping capabilities and training. So I think, there's some available information, but I think some workshops would be great for those managers that are actually, on the ground responding to fires in real time, to help, make response more effective. So sorry, you didn't get to see my slides. They were nice. Okay.
Thanks, Kapua. So I think that those needs that kind of started dovetailing pretty nicely as far as like what is more effective mitigation strategies, both before. So this idea of green breaks and post-fire response, reseeding. I would add to like all of those comments that there are lots of efforts being done. We hear stories all the time by watershed partnerships, by different conservation organizations of trying these things, but they have very limited capacity to monitor their success. So I don't know how many stories we've gotten of post-fire seeding, seed balls, things like this, but we don't have results, right? So this is another thing where like, how do we kind of partner up with researchers, getting them on board with these active, the work on the ground. But before I start rambling too much, are there any questions from the audience that you guys are itching to throw at these guys? Okay, Kurt.
Bringing the military in, I'm wondering, I'm pretty sure in California, we have the Forest Services use older model Predator drones for fire tracking. And I'm just wondering if there's any interaction between the military and the public sector for using such kind of tools and techniques.
I'll see if I can use this like a radio.
Working.
Yes, military drones are used on Army fire response, but I don't have access to that. So they work, I didn't talk about this, but we have a wildland fire strike team, the Army does, and they pull in those resources, on fires, but it takes a while, and there's a lot of moving parts of the military. I would say, our helicopter response is great when we have a good pilot and when they're there on time and, don't leave until the fire is totally out, which has been good when you get a lot of practice in the summer, 3 fires in a row. You know, we're a well-oiled machine by the end of the summer. We need to do a lot of pre-season planning and checking equipment and yeah, doing all of that. But the military is definitely has important resources that we can utilize. I don't know that that's anything to get at though, you know, early detection. It's helpful during the firefight, but not so much, you know, for identifying fires before they get out of control.
Thanks, Kapua. Another question at the back first.
Mahalo. Thanks for the presentations. So seeds are a big deal. And you said you guys have, you know, millions of seed, but I'm wondering on a scale perspective, how many seeds do we really need to have in a seed bank or be producing to stay ahead of it is also to react to the situations that we have?
So sorry, I'm not the seed scientist, but we have a really great guy, Dr. Tim Chambers, who works with us, and the scale up from 26 million seeds is substantial. I don't have a number, but I think we're talking billions. Yeah, it's in the hundreds of millions for sure. Yeah, there's some pilot projects happening. I think Hawaiʻi Agricultural Research Center has some land out in Kunia, and there's gonna be like maybe, I think it's a half-acre plot that's gonna be utilized to try to initiate some seed orchard work, but it really needs to be expanded exponentially from that. But I think the more people are thinking about it and you know, applying for grants to do it, the better.
I have a plan, and my plan is there's places that burn all the time, and the fire does the same thing all the time because it starts all the time because the people light it all the time at the same place. So the fire is predictable, the footprint, where it's going to go, and all that other kind of stuff. So when I look at the fire footprint, right? If this table is on fire, I might not necessarily try and scatter seed over this whole thing. So the fire is always coming from this way. With the hydromulch, right? We lay the hydromulch down as like a band. Then it grows. And then when the thing grows, it's dropping seeds like crazy because the thing is really dense. We're talking like, what was it? Like
A lot.
per meter, like a lot of stems per meter, like a lot. And so it's making this huge seed bank, and then it's going to burn again, right? But when it burns again, now you got all the seeds, and then they grow up and stuff like that. And so theoretically, we can expand our fire break, our green break or whatever by itself. So it's not like I'm trying to do this thing where it's kind of like this band that hopefully self-propagates and expands. And instead of just like this whole broadcast thing, I'm trying to vegetate this thing to prevent the grass from growing. So instead of super duper like spread out and sparse, we're going real thick. And then that's the break that breaks the grass fuel chain thing.
I think though, so in Makua, we had restored the native shrubland around this Ma'ohauhele population, and I can't remember the number of acres off the top of my head, is less than 10 acres, but it's substantial, and substantial amounts of work had gone in, and substantial recovery of, you know, the native components associated with this habitat had recovered. But when the fire burned this summer, I mean, you know, a Guinea grass fire, you need not just, you need a huge area that's basically going to be sacrificed on the edge of that Guinea grass before you get to habitat that might survive that fire. So this, it's not only the scale of the seeding and the scale of, it's the scale of the area over that's being revegetated, and strategically how that's, you know, geographically oriented. And so I think, you know, Ryan's on the right track, but I think I mean, the scale up to something that's not going to just get run over and totally annihilated every time there's a fire is a little daunting.
Kind of using species too that you may expect would recover, either resprouting or reseeding as well. So like these green breaks are in a sense expendable. So it's kind of like, how can you balance the effort to establish it, like Ryan's saying, with, you know, the expectation of like, you know, some of it's going to burn. And so you're being really strategic about where you establish it.
I just have one quick thing to add, and that's in that fire, the first picture I showed, the lightning strike fire. Afterwards, we realized how limited our capacity was to respond rapidly. And it was at so many different levels. It takes state government a long time to do anything. And we realized, for example, we didn't have the seeds we needed. That was 2,000 acres, and maybe we had enough seed to cover, I don't know, 5 acres at the most. In our fridge, and that's it. I mean, that's all with the capacity we had. That's all we're able to get, and that's with a full-time crew of about 13. But we had all of these grand plans and visions, and I'm sure both of these two have the same. Where, like, you know, pie in the sky, we would have been out there with drones mapping everything after the fire, because what a great time to get visual imagery. You can see everything. You can find out where all the trails are, the roads, the heiau. So that you can protect it. But we didn't have the money to be able to do that. But what we did have, you know, were a couple little strokes of genius. And so one of our crew went out after the fire and the fountain grass starts to come up, like after 2-3 months, it's just about to where it was before. And he said, hey, if we spray it, we can actually extend our fuel break and double it without having to weed whack 5 miles. And that was just a stroke of genius. And they went out and they did it. And then our fire break was now twice as wide. And during the next fire, that made a difference. So I think, you know, scenario planning could be a great thing. Basically, like sitting down with a group of people and saying, like, okay, here's this fire. It's in this area. You know, you're imagining it, right? It's not real, but what do you do? And what kind of adaptive capacity do you have as an organization? What resources do you have? And then, you know, how do you get there if you can't meet that?
Then I would just add one thing, like there are models for this in Hawaii. Like we had the restoration at Kaho'olawe, they Plant Materials Center on Molokai was producing thousands and thousands and thousands of seed, right? But that's a contract in place for them to do that work. You know, so this stuff has to be in place, as everyone's saying, before the fire happens. Was there another question on this? Did you have a question, or was it answered potentially?
Yeah, thanks. I'm not a fire scientist, so I've enjoyed the short presentations. I've learned a lot. And so, yeah, so question. So what about like prescribed burns, like maybe in small areas, something like that? And then you can go in after those with Ryan's mulch and hydroseal, which seems like it's got superpowers. So maybe you could, has that been thought of here, like the way it has in other parts of the United States? It could be some sort of a preventative way.
I think I have this thing figured out and then I push a different button. Yeah, the Army does prescribe burns here on Oahu, but they're done in the late spring, and the grass is herbicided so that it has a, you know, lower chance of escaping. I personally would not, like, for example, on the Big Island in fountain grass, would not ever want to put fire on the ground intentionally. We did Dr. Andy Beavers from Colorado State did a test burn some years ago. I think you were there for that, Clay. One of your photos in your slideshow was that, and it was super hyper controlled, so everyone thought, and it got out of control. So yeah, so I hear that. It would be nice to be able to use that as a tool, but I'm leery. I don't know what you guys think.
So the stuff that I'm dealing with is like, can be like 8-foot tall Guinea grass. And like, I got pictures of like 60-foot flames from 8-foot tall Guinea grass. And something like that, you're not stopping it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't, you're like, I've seen like fires jump from ridge to ridge in like Christmas berry and Guinea grass. And I've done training fires. Like we lit, you know, we did a dozer break and we lit on fire and we did training and stuff. And sometimes it was hairy, like just one small buffalo grass of like six inches tall, and it's ripping. All of a sudden it gets a little bit of wind on it and it starts ripping and it starts to scorch the trees and everybody's holding ass. It's like, oh, I hope it doesn't jump the break, you know, this kind of stuff. So I'm not comfortable personally with doing, I mean, there's a time and a place for it. Yeah. Like there's prescribed fires on with the Army and stuff like that. Fish and Wildlife does it on James Campbell and stuff like that in the ponds and stuff like that. But with our fuel type, fuels weather topography, the fuels are huge. The topography can be relatively steep. No breaks around it because it's complete wilderness. Like, where is it going to stop? Like, you're going to light this thing and hopefully it's going to stop, but there's no stops because there's no roads, no nothing. And then the weather, I mean, it switches throughout the day. Diurnal winds switch throughout the day in like Waiʻi, for example. I don't think we have a good alignment to practice prescribed fires in the places where we need it the most.
Yeah, like one of the word prescribed implies you have a prescription within which the fire is safe to manage, right? And so one of the problems in Hawaii is that prescription. What's your window of relative humidity? What's your window of wind speed? What we're finding, especially with these non-native grasses, is that the humidities that they burn at are sort of where mainland, somewhere in Florida or somewhere else, they would look at these relative humidities, 60, 70% and think you're never going to even have a fire. And meanwhile here, it's like Ryan's describing, they just rage. So we don't really have well-defined weather windows to sort of be able to predict what these things are going to do. It's quite difficult. I'm not watching time. How are we on time? 10, what does that mean? 20 minutes, 10 minutes? 15 minutes? Do we have other questions from the audience? Anywhere? Okay, Maddie.
A big problem for the fire situation in Hawaii is the underutilized agricultural lands. And a big component of that is the lack of cattle and ruminant animals on the land. Is there any talk of revitalizing that in like key areas as a way to create some sort of even just lower fuels place adjacent to like high fire areas or you know, areas of conservation interest?
Clay, you want to do that one?
I almost want to pass to Elizabeth. Maddie wants to start emu farm. I know at his okay, I mean, I can talk about, there is obviously like a lot of partnerships, I think, with communities in grazing. I don't think we're at the place which you can, if you wanted to compare it to like California, where they're doing contract grazing. Portugal and Spain, they pay herders to graze thousands of miles of breaks. We're not quite there yet. I mean, I could point to example from the Army, sorry, Kapua, but where the Department of Defense wanted Parker Ranch to pay for the forage to use their animals to graze and reduce the fuels. And so I think kind of viewing that as a service is a little bit novel, but I actually would point it to Elliott because yeah, please take it away. Cause I think you guys, I would argue Pu'uwawa and that kind of history with the ranching leases on there are probably at the forefront while you were working in there of those kinds of partnerships.
Sure, yeah, I could speak to that for a minute. So Pu'uwawa has a long history as a cattle ranch. And I believe it was late 1800s. It was first a sheep ranch, and then that failed because of invasive species, which got into the wool and destroyed that opportunity. So cattle were brought in, and to me, it's one of the worst places to do cattle ranching because it's fountain grass, which is low quality forage. And yet, like, it had one of the largest cattle ranches in the United States for a time. And it's a double-edged sword, as I'm sure a lot of folks in this room know, because cattle over time degrade native forest. And so if you have cattle in the forest, then eventually you're going to lose it. The cattle are going to trample, they're going to eat the native seedlings. And the early foresters realized that by basically setting up the forest reserve system to kick out the cattle. And that was one of the major reasons for that. So Puawa has been unique in that it had a long history as a cattle ranch, thousands of acres of exotic grasses, had the infrastructure for cattle grazing, and it had interested people who wanted to do that, who wanted to have cattle there. All of those things really kind of needed to come together in order to make it work. And I think that's one of the biggest things, because we talked for years about trying to extend cattle grazing into Pu'anahulu, which was nearby, and that burns all the time. And it just doesn't have the infrastructure. So to put in the cattle paddocks and the water lines, there's no water, right? That whole region is called Kekaha Vaiole, which means the land without water. So, you know, you got to bring in water somehow. At Puawa, we had it was like an $8 million project to repair this crazy catchment system from up in the forest bird sanctuary all the way down to below the highway in order to give cattle access to that, chew down that invasive grass. And we worked with tons of partners, including Pacific Fire Exchange, Hawaiʻi Wildfire Management Organization, CLAY with grad students. So it's something that is possible. But then if your whole point is forest restoration, then it's really just a stopgap measure, right? Because over time, if the cattle are in the native forest, they're going to be chewing down the grasses, reducing fire risk, but then they're also going to be, you know, eliminating native seedlings. So it's complicated, but possible.
Can I just respond to your comment about the Army?
No.
So actually the Army
ahead.
does have a lease with a rancher around Waikiki to protect those homes, right, primarily. So Kemuku maneuver area, the Kemuku area was formerly Parker Ranch, you know, so there's not much native forest left. The Pu'us are the only place with anything native remaining. So there's actually I think it's really close to being done, but there's another large area of Kemuku that's going to be leased to a second rancher to you know, and maybe the interest is there because after the Mana fire, so much of that pasture got burned and they need a place for their cattle. But I don't know, regardless, it's, the risk is recognized and that's one way to address it. But I mean, where there is native forest, you can't do that, right? Where it's former pasture and all grass, there's more possibilities, and it would be like, protecting a kipuka surrounded by cattle.
I would just
native.
That Mana Road fire just last year, it burned through grazed pasture like nothing, right? So there's going to be weather conditions, which we're going to push it to the limit, even grazing as a strategy to reduce fire risk. Here is another question.
I'm hoping that you folks can speak to the consequences to the aquifer recharging watersheds of these fires that you're seeing. That's a big question, I know, but.
That sounds like a DLNR question.
Pass. So I think Clay said that you hit the forest and the fire burns through the grasslands and then it eats a little bit away at the forest. And the next time it more and more and more. So we're talking about a rollback of the forest line. And in Hawaii, the forest is important for aquifer recharge. So I would say that fire is bad for aquifer recharge, and that is the mechanism that it screws it up.
Good answer. Another question on the other side. Should have 2 mics floating around.
Kapona Gown, NREM. I was raised in Waikolo, and when you even visit there, it's immediately obvious that everything's going to catch on fire at some point. And then more recently, I live in Koloko, and that area is like a rainforest where everybody pretty much thinks, well, this area is never going to burn. But with the changing climate and the seemingly rise of fire incidents, what's the likelihood that some of these traditionally non-burn areas may burn, or we actually might have a true forest fire as to our typical grassland burns?
The likelihood is like, it's already happening. So like we get fires, like the summit of the ko'olaus. Try to look at some of the ko'olaus in like Wauakua, where it's like all uluhe and in the clouds. We have multiple fires in those already, like the Kipapa fire. We had one above Pounders Beach. I mean, like way up, what is that? Laie, like it's already happening. Like when you go way up, that's where it's already happening.
Yeah, we've had some, I mean, just West Maui, right? That fire burned way up into native ecosystems, and Aluhe, which is the sort of dominant fern cover that we kind of associate with wet forest. You give it even a few weeks without water, it can burn and carry fire kind of amazingly. And we are seeing, again, like Ryan's saying, we're seeing these fires happen on windward side. There's some pretty crazy examples from the national park on volcanoes, where they've seen really low humidity, dry conditions, where they've seen forest fires go up. I don't know, Ryan, the one example that comes to mind of those Kauai, it was a lot of eucalyptus, but those fires on Kauai in 2012 that you guys were seeing, pretty proper forest fires, I would say, no?
Yes.
Thanks. Yeah, sure. Follow up, and then maybe time for one more question after that.
It seems like that, like one of the worst case scenarios I can think in my mind is that we lose a huge portion of one of these traditionally non-burn water recharging wetland areas. Is there any mitigation efforts that are immediately available to prevent that seemingly catastrophic potentiality?
I mean, I think the strategies are what Elizabeth really laid out earlier. It's like kind of mobilizing where you have kind of community efforts combined with these agencies. And then, we're talking about the strategies that Ryan really spelled out, a lot of them in the most detail, I think, of, green breaks and other kinds of ways to manage fuels and fire risk. You want to add something?
I was just going to add, we have to make sure we're not starting fires. So we just have to make sure we're not starting fires and that everyone's in on that. And then that we're also managing the fuels around it so that it can't carry. But it's those three parts, right? So we also have to make sure our firefighters have what they need to get there right away and keep the fire small. So all those parts need to be addressed.
Clay, can I say something about?
Sure.
So the after this past summer, the Oahu Army Wildland Fire Program manager developed a staffing step-up plan, which was recognizing the severity and unprecedented conditions that led to some of the fires that we had this summer, one of which burned a month and a half, despite helicopters being on it for that month and a half. He developed a staffing step-up plan to be able to, respond more rapidly with more resources as quickly as possible when a fire does occur. But also what he's done is he's putting out this wildfire awareness bulletin to within the Army. And it is so amazing, the educational opportunity the education that's achieved through that. Just really simple, like he does it when it gets to a staffing class 3, it goes up to 5, then he's going to do it, every week. And he's going to say, what's happening to these major indices, and how rapidly are they changing? So we can anticipate, the Army can anticipate that, adapting their training accordingly, and that some things will not be, allowable, because we want to prevent them from starting in the first place. But also just like for everybody having a heightened level of awareness, I think is super critical. And so what Elizabeth was talking about was right on, right? I mean, we need everybody buying into this and preaching about it, right? I mean, it's unprecedented. These wildfire seasons are going to go from May till, November. So it's half of the year, right, that we have to have this awareness, and people get tired of hearing about it, right? But we've got to be creative about how we message about that so that people care, people can call 911 when they see something that, people are out all around. So, yeah.
I think, sorry, do you want to go?
Go ahead, Ryan, go ahead.
Okay, when I think of fire, I think of two negative things is after effects, is erosion and weeds, yeah. And so we talked about the weed thing, right? Like revegetating and whatnot. And we had this project in 2002, 2003 in Wanakai Saddle. It was dominantly native and it burned. And it was bad. It was weird because it was raining and we was fighting a fire in the rain. Like we'd collect water in our helmets and then dump it on the burning emus and stuff. But it was still burning. It was weird. Anyway, because it was steep topography, we did this thing where we was trying to, we flew in these long coir logs and there are all kinds of stuff. And we tried to, build like these check dams to prevent the erosion and stuff like that. And then UH had a project where they're going up there and doing vegetation monitoring. And we're killing weeds, like rubus was really bad up there and all this other kind of stuff. And then they're outplanting and stuff like that. So we did that for the erosion stuff. And so to answer your question, is there any kind of work? We did that once. Now I don't think we've ever done that again. But my strategy now is trying to do like more landscape stuff with the aero seeding instead of planting and with the hydro seeding and the green breaks and the fuel breaks and all that other kind of stuff. So I think that's kind of what my focus is right now. I don't know if it's going to work.
I just add another benefit or outcome of that fire was that it brought all these partners together that really kind of kickstarted the Waianae Mountain Watershed Partnership, which is now someone that Ryan partners with till this day to do a lot of these projects. So, there's these other after effects that can be very positive from fire. And Elliott, yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to add that interacting threats is really important and it's something that seems to be shifting or changing. So the American Meteorological Society just came out with an annual report that looked at compounding threats of heat wave and drought, for example, and how that has an even greater impact on fires than either one of those. And we seem to be seeing a lot more of these extreme climatic events where you have these multiple interacting threats. And so, one question is, can the past always guide us? We may have to be thinking about outside the box and imagining things that haven't happened yet. Just looking at what's happening in the San Francisco Bay Area right now with flooding and tornadoes, and that's after 3 years of extreme drought. So yeah, we've got to think carefully about these and just imagine different scenarios and what we might be able to do to prevent fire.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Elliott. I know we don't have time for questions, but I just add during the Hurricane Lane, they were evacuating hurricane shelters because of fires in West Maui. So these are weird interactions that we have to prepare for. But thank you guys for the panelists. Big round of applause, please.